This is a book that I think the Roth fans have been waiting for. There hasn't been a book. I mean, Dave wrote a book himself.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a book that really looks into Dave's career, mostly his solo years, because the book focuses, you do cover the Van Halen years, but the bulk of it is his solo years, correct?
Yeah, if you love Crazy from the Heat, Dave's book from, I believe, 97, like I do, which I think is out of print. Some insider told me why it's out of print, and it's insane why it's out of print. But if you read that book, which is awesome, he doesn't talk a lot about his solo career. The quote unquote Yankee Rose Band, as he calls them, it's like 3 pages. That's it in that whole book. So, really, between 85 and I guess you could say 94 or 97, because DLR Band is around the same time that book came out. It's really, we don't know anything about Slam Dunk or Just Like Paradise or anything like that.
You do cover each of the solo albums pretty extensively. How many people did you talk to for this book?
Definitely over 100. I mean, some of them were as quick as me shoehorning a question in towards the end of the interview, knowing I'm about to get kicked off the call by the publicist, or knowing that I already got what I needed about the new project and shoehorning a question. And others were us literally talking Dave and Van Halen nonstop for 30, 60, 90 minutes. A couple of them were 2 hour-ish interviews that happened. So some of them were 2020. In the case of the Dave interview that's in the first chapter, that's '03. But otherwise, it's all pretty much 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, a tiny bit, because I turned the book in for so long ago. But I did my best to keep it up to date and modern towards the end. That was when I got the revisions after turning in the manuscript, kept it pretty modern.
This interview is going to run on the Van Halen news desk, but also I have my podcast booked on rock. So maybe for those who aren't super familiar with the history of Van Halen, just quickly talk about the rise of the band and the role that Dave played specifically offstage as far as promoting the band.
Van Halen news desk audience is pretty interesting, where you have a lot of people who know a lot of stuff. You have a little bit of the people who just like the hits, and then you have the people who just loathe Van Halen. And again, you don't know why. They're on the site every single day, trash talking everything. So I think that the book is mostly towards those 80% of the Van Halen news desk people who want to know everything. And I did what I could to get into the nitty gritty. Now, it's very different from Greg Renoff. Now, Greg's excellent books. He spoke to a lot of people who are actually at the backyard parties. For me, it's a lot less of that because it's a Dave centric book. And a lot of the commenters, and part of this long winded explanation here, a lot of the commenters are going like, why Dave? And they go, oh, not as great as of a singer as Sammy. Oh, he was embarrassing with X, Y, and Z. But the bottom line is, as amazing as Eddie and Alex were, they did need that business person, that little engine that was going to streamline it and make Van Halen palatable. Without Dave, Van Halen would have been much more prog. They would have had less chorusy kind of aspects. They would have been less danceable. And it's really the danceability, the choruses, the visual flash that got Van Halen from being a cover band to this sought out signed band.
And he's talked in concert about putting the flyers up all over the place. And there's
Yeah.
that great story about him after the Warner Brothers. I'm sorry, not Warner Brothers. It was the Casablanca Records. They went to see Bill Aucoin, and Bill Aucoin said,
Yeah.
sorry, guys, Gene Simmons produced the demo. But Dave turns that into a positive. He takes that demo tape and goes to a local radio station and says, was it Rodney Bingenheimer was the DJ, I think,
Yes.
and says, we just put together a demo tape. Give it a listen. And then they play the song on the radio. So he was endlessly promoting that band, endlessly.
Absolutely. And I think that you meet a lot of people in life who, when their intended big break doesn't happen, they're defeated and they look at it all as being over. So I think your average musician would go, well, Gene Simmons said he was going to produce us and sign us, and it didn't work out. Okay, it's over. And in the case of Van Halen, that was not the case at all. With Dave, especially in the early days, there was that work ethic there. And so, Gene turned him down ultimately because he couldn't get the support of Bill Aucoin, other members of Kiss, and he was getting busy with getting back into Kiss mode. We talked a little bit about that when I interviewed Gene, and I think it was 2017, the first time I interviewed him of the two times. And I think it's interesting that Dave had that go-getter mindset considering his upbringing. Most people who grow up in a mansion in a wealthy family don't have that go-getter work ethic.
And as we know, the history of Van Halen from 1978 to 1984, they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're the biggest band around. But nobody on the outside knew what was going on the inside. Band about to implode. And what's interesting is it appears as if Dave was ready to get back into the studio for the follow-up to 1984. He even mentioned it on David Letterman in around this time, actually, in 1985, when he was promoting Crazy from the Heat, the EP. He's playing songs like California Girls and I think maybe even Just a Gigolo for Eddie, Alex, and Michael on a flight back from a gig.
Yes.
What do you make of that whole period? Like, did Dave want to do a Phil Collins? Did he want to just do both? I don't think and did that backfire? I don't think he wanted out.
I think there were a few questions there. So the first one is, what's the deal with that whole thing? I come away from this book having a lot of empathy for Dave in terms of how he left Van Halen. I don't think he intended to permanently quit. I think he thought it was going to be a hiatus where he was going to be back in, a year or two or three or four kind of years, having done the movie, having done his solo career thing. Maybe the ego was out there, so he thought he was going to be like Cher or Madonna, hence the movie. Dave Jellison kind of put that in my ear a little bit.
For those who don't know, Dave Jellison
worked with Van Halen, I think starting with the Diver Down tour. So 82, he was there till the end. He carried on with Dave through Eat 'Em and Smile. And I think he did pre-production and helped design the Skyscraper tour, but was out of the picture. Before all that, original or second bassist in Rat. These days, a very successful director of commercials and ad agency things, to the point that if you put Dave Jellison's name and then the parentheses, your name checking thing, I don't think Roth would be one of the first 10 names there.
Wow.
That's how well he's done. So Dave Jellison was supposed to be assistant director or assistant to the director or whatever on the Crazy from the Heat movie that ultimately didn't get made. And it sounds like in talking to Dave Jellison that Eat 'Em and Smile was not supposed to be an album, like a solo album. It was supposed to be the movie soundtrack or some semblance of a movie soundtrack. Dave wasn't supposed to do a world tour and that kind of thing. It was more like, here's the movie. I'm a movie star. Back to Van Halen.
And he wanted Van Halen to make the music.
He asked Eddie, as the story goes, and Eddie was so insulted that it was an egotistical thing. How dare he? But the reason I'm so empathetic to Dave in all this is because you look at the Nicolette Larson album that Eddie played on as a favorite of Ted Templeman, the Wildlife soundtrack that he did, the song that wound up in Back to the Future, that TV movie for Valerie Bertinelli that he scored called The Seduction of Gina, the Starfleet project with Brian May, the song on Thriller by Michael Jackson.
I heard of that song. Yeah.
I think. And then, a couple of times I've heard that thing called Beat It, one of the biggest records ever. And then here's Dave who goes, I want to do a movie. Oh, you traitor. Eddie could do anything he wanted. And suddenly Dave wants to do a little thing and it's, he's not on our team. He's not playing on our team. Does that make sense to you?
To me, yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I mean, it doesn't sound like he wanted out. It sounded like he knew at that point they needed a break.
Yeah.
But I think I'm sure he was frustrated that Eddie was taking a little bit more creative control once he built 5150 Studios.
Oh,
for sure. That had
sure.
something to do with it too.
For sure, that was a factor.
It's the story of him and Ted Templeman waiting outside 5150 for Eddie to come out. And he didn't come out.
There's also the factor that you have Dave is still unmarried all these years later, but I think he was the only unmarried or unhitched to a significant other member at that point in time. So Dave did interviews after he left Van Halen saying, I was ready to do world tours. It's not about making money on the road for me. You could always make money later. I just want to get out there and see the world. So if you look at the touring that Van Halen did after Van Halen won, it's not like they went everywhere and everywhere and everywhere. It's not like they were relentlessly pounding the pavement in Europe. Van Halen, I don't think toured. Uh, well, the story is that they never toured Scotland again after the first time that they were there. Something about someone stealing a pillow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great story.
So I look at certain things with Dave and I believe it verbatim. Other things, I think he's just a good storyteller. But if you fast forward to the Sammy years and you see that in the mid 90s, they're opening for Bon Jovi on a European tour. You go, why is that? Because Van Halen was not hitting the pavement in Europe as much as it should have at its in his heyday. So when you talk to people from Europe, usually Van Halen is not one of the top 10 bands or top 20 bands they talk about when they talk about influential bands. Deep Purple is like 20 times bigger than Van Halen in Europe.
Talk about the Crazy from the Heat film, though. What was this to be about? How close did it get to coming out? And share some of what Dave's then bassist Billy Sheehan told you about the cutthroat business that Hollywood was and probably still is, but Dave found out firsthand.
I think it was Dave Jellison who told me that the film was really about to be made in terms of it was costumed. If you read the script, it mentions songs and where they are in the script. You know, cue this song. That kind of thing is in there. Billy Sheehan told me he was costumed, that he still has, I guess, the pimp jacket or something that he was supposed to have for a particular scene. Sam Ingrafia, who's a comic actor, character actor, he was on Barry on HBO a couple of years ago and has a new book. He had a meeting with Dave about casting for it. Dave put out the SOS call to Aerosmith and all these people to write music for it, whether or not that was actually legit. But the key is this was an actual movie that Dave was actually going to direct with an actual director's fee, to the point that when it got shelved by CBS, supposedly CBS canned it because it had 5 or 6 bombs in a row. And it just takes X number of failures to just close a record company or film studio. But when Dave sued, he got paid his director's fee and maybe some more money out of court in a settlement. That's how far ahead it was.
And there was no overall plot to it. Was it just adventures with Dave? In fact, I think aren't the characters in Going Crazy and Yankee Rose videos and all that, and some of the songs like Lazy Night in Buffalo and those characters that he's singing about, all of that part of that movie?
I could not get through the whole script because it is brutal.
I've read it.
It's tough, but I believe so. Another person I interviewed for the book, Durga McBroom, right now she's out with Brit Floyd. She's actually sang with Pink Floyd on tour in the 80s. She's in some David Bowie stuff, I think a Stones thing or two. She's one of the girls in the convenience store part of the Yankee Rose video. I believe she's in the California Girls video. She said she had an outfit and all that for the movie. So I know that she was supposed to be there. Then the guy who has the unibrow in the convenience store in the Yankee Rose video, and I think he's also in Going Crazy, is this was such a hard thing to figure out who he was, and his name is Jerry Perzigian. That guy.
Wow.
And he co-wrote
not
the film.
On IMDb? Is that what made this so difficult? Like he's not.
I put up things online that said, "Can somebody help me figure out who he is?" And people are like, "That's Eugene Levy." It's like, no, that's not.
Looks like him though, huh?
No,
I don't. A
no,
little bit.
Looks 0% like him. But he's also in the background of that home video that Dave put out, the one where he's at the Mel's first counter.
Yes, I have it.
Depending on the video or the project, he's a different ethnicity. When we know in reality he's an Armenian American gentleman who has since then won an Emmy for TV writing.
Get out.
Yeah. So he co-wrote the film with Dave. And I don't think I put this in the book how he knew Dave, but um, if you put in Jerry Presidian's last name and Carol O'Connor um, into Google, you'll see, unfortunately, why Dave may have known Jerry Presidian.
Oh, Archie Bunker reference here. How does that? Wow.
Yeah, it's not the happiest story with the happiest ending, but people confirmed that for me, and I did not want to put in the book why Dave would have known Jerry Presidian, but
Ooh.
who's since gone on to be a successful TV writer and producer, and I think Golden Girls, Mad About You, stuff like that he worked on. It's not
Wow.
like he's going, hey, you know me from the David Lee Roth videos? No,
Wow. My ancestors spit on your haircut.
exact good line right there. So I think with all likelihood, probably most of the people in the Yankee Rose and Going Crazy videos were going to be in the Crazy from the Heat movie, which I'm guessing was supposed to be part Naked Gun, part Revenge of the Nerds, a weird beach comedy that's self-referential with parodies and sidebars that would be totally canceled in 2023.
You mentioned Frank Meyer. Frank, this guy has been everywhere. He
Yeah.
has, I love having him on the podcast. He's got stories. And one of the stories has to do with Eat 'em and Smile. Talk about this story about
Growing up with the
him.
Zappa kids.
Yes. So
Yeah.
he got a chance to hear these songs before anybody else did. Frank is a musician, an author, a documentarian. I mean,
Yeah.
and he grew up in the LA area, friends with Dweezil Zappa. So that's where this story begins.
Yeah. Frank was one of the first people to hear the songs on Eat 'em and Smile. And at that time, he kind of knew that Dave was casting around for a band, but not everybody knew that Eat 'em and Smile was coming.
Pulls up in his driveway, right? And Stevie Vai is in the passenger seat, and Frank gets in the back seat, and they pop in the cassette. And
Yeah.
he's hearing Yankee Rose, and
I
he's
think
like,
Tobacco Road, I think also.
yeah. It's like, what is this? Yeah, it's just made an album with David Lee Roth. What? Because nobody knew at that point, and it wasn't out there
Yeah.
in the public. How much of Dave do you think is show, and how much is the real Dave, in the sense of on stage, he had to have gotten himself in amazing shape. And we read the stories about him and Stevie Vai going out for a run every morning. So that the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing, I wonder how much of that was story and how much of it was true. Or did maybe Dave live that way up to a certain point and said, I gotta get my shit together, make sure I stay in shape, but I gotta maintain that image that I'm still out there partying my ass off. But there's no way.
Yeah.
The shows that he put on, I can't even imagine if he was able to do that, living the lifestyle that he supposedly was living.
I think that any band on their first or second tour, they see all the leftover food in the dressing room and the leftover drinks. They go, oh, we got to take that for the bus or for the van. Let's take all the leftover chips behind. You leave nothing behind. You take everything with you because it'd be a waste. And then after a while, you go, oh, wait, there's always going to be more chips and more free beer and more soda. And it becomes more of a power thing to be able to say, no, I'm walking away from it. But if you tell that to the average person who for the first time sees free food and free drinks and free drugs, they go, wait, so you're not going to take that? That's crazy. I think that you can hit a limit with free booze and free food and free drugs and free everything like that. But if you're David Lee Roth, who's the party master, it's the image. So I would think at the beginning, he indulged in everything. Then maybe after a while, it became and this is all allegedly, I have no insider knowledge. I'm not claiming it's facts. There's your legal disclaimer. I would imagine that over time, you need some of that to keep up your energy. But then you eventually fully kick it, but it's not good for the image to be the sober guy. Every artist that we love, once Aerosmith talks about how great it is to be clean, you go, oh, that's not so cool. But then the stories that I have in the book about Dave and Crazy Girls, the strip club in LA in the mid 90s, it kind of seems like maybe he went back to the partying. So maybe he has phases where he likes certain things at certain times, but otherwise is super healthy. Like what somebody I know that has known Dave in recent years sent me a photo. They just at 1 a.m. just texted me a photo of Dave eating a salad.
You
They just
said this.
thought
You've
it was good.
mentioned this in other podcasts. I've seen
And
one. There was one online. I don't know if it's the same one, but yeah, he's eating a salad. Like somebody takes a picture of him. He's outside at a restaurant. So we
yeah,
know he eats salad. That's good.
I hear he eats super clean, but then again, he loves talking about McDonald's a lot. So I'd have to imagine that he's eating clean 6 to 6.5 days of the week. And then the half a day to 1 day of the week comes the Big Mac. And then he works his ass off to eat clean the next 6.5 days.
They call that the cheat day diet. That's what they call it.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine because otherwise, how does a person party and party and party, yet sing and brave all the travel and act like a creative person and do the meet and greets and the whole schedule? It's just not possible long term. It might be possible for a few weeks, but if you did that for 40 plus years, you'd be in a body bag. So I look at the music that David Lee Roth is singing, which is supposed to be this ageless, partying, good times music, at least for the first six Van Halen albums and the first few solo albums before he got a little more bluesy. And every night you see him is it's not meant for the people who've seen him 10 times before. It's meant for the first time that you've ever seen him or this tour. It's always supposed to have that new feeling to it. So then when you see him the second time, he does the same exact banter as the first time. You go, oh, I get it. This is a show. The songs are going to be in the same order every night with the same banter. But the first time you see it, it is the best thing you've ever seen. And I don't
No
think
doubt.
you could do that if you were fried out of your mind all the time.
Now, you know, I could not go through this interview without asking you about Sunrisa Salvaje because I know you well enough to know that you have, I
Yeah.
guess, an obsession with this album. Tell the Spanish version of Eat 'em and Smile. Why did it happen? Billy Sheehan tells you the story behind this.
Yeah. Billy Sheehan had read an article. I still don't know which article it was, but something in the mid 80s about 20% of all music in the Los Angeles area being bought by people who spoke Spanish as a first language. Dave is a person who's always wanted to study languages. He tells you the story about how he was bussed into a different school district. I still don't think that. I don't know if that's true. I still think the man of the people, David Lee Roth, is kind of this concoction of a personality. Are you with me, or am I too conspiracy theory?
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on this. And by the way, I'm just thinking as you tell me this too, is that you gave Dave the opportunity to read this book and say, you tell me whatever is not true or what
Oh yeah,
you you can let me know, but you didn't hear back from him.
I the first pitch I think was just, "Hey, I'm writing a book. If you want to participate." And the second one was, "Hey, just following up to make sure you're reading these notes." And then the third one was kind of like, "If you participate, I'll give you creative control." I think the fourth one was, just making sure you're getting these. If you want to read through it and just tell me everything that's wrong so you could correct it, I can star, "Hey, Dave says it's wrong." And I got the same response to all of them, which was no response,
None.
zero, not even
Okay.
a no. And I went through his accountant slash manager slash makeshift mother, who you see in the background of a lot of his recent videos. I tried a few different publicists who'd repped him in recent years. I spoke with people who've been in his band in recent years. There's not a lot of contact going out. The way it kind of goes with Dave is like, "We're doing this right now. Are you available?" And that's how
Interesting.
it seems to have been the last like 5, 6 years over there,
So
as
this
opposed to having a proactive manager with a day-to-day person who's checking avails and has an iCal that's shared. This is just like, "What are you doing right now? Dave needs you to track this right now at Henson, and we're paying you way too much, and be there." And you
yeah.
can't tell.
So everything that you've gotten is from people who were there, like Billy Sheehan.
Yeah.
Sunrisa
Uh,
Salvaje.
yeah. So Sonrisa Salvaje,
Oh, did I
Billy.
get
Yeah.
Sunrisa Salvaje? Okay.
Sonrisa Salvaje. I can't say that right. Ramses, if the man from Cabo himself hears this, he will shame me.
Ramses Rios.
Ramses is great. He's one of the people that keeps Dave's legacy alive and fresh.
The Mojo
But
Dojo YouTube channel. Free plug.
exactly. And Billy Sheehan and Dave did all the vocals on Sonrisa Salvaje. There's no backing vocals from Steve Vai or Jesse Harms or Greg Bissonette. It's all Billy and Dave. And I don't think Billy speaks Spanish. I think it was just phonetically like a musician. You hear the vowels and you mimic it.
Wow. Then ahead of his time, Diamond Dave, ahead of his time.
Oh, totally. I mean, think about it. The 60s, yes, the Beatles and Motown, they cut their hits for international markets. And every now and then you see like a Bowie song that he cut in Japanese. You see that kind of thing. But who did full albums in Spanish that wasn't of Hispanic descent? Eat Smile never gets old to me.
No.
To you, does it ever get old?
No. But we're going to get to the album I think we both would say is our personal favorite, which is Skyscraper. That's what we're going to get to next. And that's, I guess, an unpopular.
Yeah, super unpopular.
But just because that's when I became a fan of Dave. 1988, 89, I was 16, 17 years old, and I hear Just Like Paradise, and I'm starting to get into Van Halen. And so there's the personal connection there. I get it. Eat 'Em and Smile is a classic. But Skyscraper has two of my favorite songs, Just Like Paradise and Damn Good.
Yeah.
And I didn't know from reading your book that the Just Like Paradise video inspired a scene in Sylvester Stallone's film Cliffhanger. But tell us about Damn Good. This was originally a Stevie Vai solo project.
Yeah, originally it was. I don't know the chronology of that. It seems like Skyscraper was the first album where Dave kind of went, "Hey, I'm low on ideas. What do you got? What do you got? What do you got?" As opposed to going, "Hey, me and the boys are going to co-write an album worth of things." So when you hear Perfect Timing and Two Fools a Minute, you kind of got to go, what is that? What were those supposed to be? Why are they on this album? But I love Skyscraper simply because of that Japanese TV special from '88, that Toshiba special that is still on YouTube, because you see that and you see how this was supposed to be a global album, a statement. The way that Dave announced Skyscraper by that Tower Records stunt where he scaled down from the ceiling of that off of a fake mountain.
Dave is probably I don't think anybody promotes a product better than Dave, especially in his days with Van Halen and those first few albums. Even with A Little Ain't Enough, he was the guy you want to front your band and promote something. He was just so good at it. So good at that.
I'm with you. And I think that Eat 'Em and Smile and Skyscraper were fully realized marketing campaigns. And A Little Ain't Enough was not a fully realized marketing campaign. And the albums after that were not. And if you look at the DLR band from '97, he didn't even do a music video for Slam Dunk. So I think that he came into Skyscraper going, this is a world tour. This is a thing. This is a statement. And the next album, A Little Ain't Enough, he did Europe, he did the US and Canada, but he didn't go to Japan, as far as I know, or Australia or South America. So there is definitely some changes, and it's kind of like Skyscraper is the last big deal thing he did, the last thing where he put all the effort into it. And it was such a high production stage show that it makes you wonder. I've read this about Guns N' Roses, about how, let's say they were doing a 3-year world tour. The first 2 years were to break even, and then all the profit was on the last 9 to 12 months of it. I cannot see that Skyscraper tour turning profitable within the first 6 months.
Yeah, well, let's get to the 90s. 91, A Little Ain't Enough, because the thing is he brings in Bob Rock to produce, which is Bob Rock at that time was one of the most sought after producers. So he's really, he's aiming for the fences. For this album, he brings in Jason Becker, who sadly diagnosed with ALS early on, so he's not able to tour with him. But he does bring in Steve Hunter, and he still has Bissonette on drums. I think he has Greg on drums, Matt on bass. I
He
believe.
is Matt on based on the album, but not on the tour.
Okay. What was the initial plan for the cover and the title? I thought this was interesting because I did not know this until reading your book.
My only source for A Little Ain't Enough originally be calling cutting out and having different artwork is one Dave interview where he talked about getting censored because the album cover was too controversial. But, and I apologize for repeating stuff I've said in other interviews, but I just have a suspicion about that all because the Little Ain't Enough music video, the first single, got banned by MTV. So it makes you wonder if Dave's thought, well, you know what's really going to sell this one? Getting banned from here and here and here. Controversy is going to sell it. Because, yes, with 2023 eyes, Little People in Blackface is offensive, but that wouldn't get you banned from MTV. What in the Little Ain't Enough music video could get you banned? It was like girls in bikinis? No, because every Roth video from Crazy from the Heat had that. So what in that video? Graffiti? No. Fake Dallas Cowboys girls cheerleaders? No.
Yeah.
Long stereo?
Yeah.
What would get banned from that video? And also in that era, MTV, when a video was too controversial, I think they would play it at 10 o'clock or maybe slot it for Headbangers Ball. And Dave was still cool enough for Headbangers Ball in that era because of Van Halen. It's not like Van Halen was 20 years ago. Van Halen was like 6 years ago.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know if I buy this whole, oh, it was banned and that was controversial so much as it might have been a marketing point.
What do you make of him not being on any of the album art? No pictures of him.
And the band also not in the promo pics, just Dave. Whereas Eat 'em and Smile was a band and it had Bissonette and all that in the promo photos. The magazine cover, sometimes it was him and Steve Vai.
And Dave's on the cover of Eat 'em and Smile and Skyscraper, but he's not only not on the cover of A Little Ain't Enough, he's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Dave is image conscious, not because, he's embarrassed, but because he's conceptualizing all this kind of stuff. The One of the interviews I did recently, the people were making fun of the Little Ain't Enough album covers, saying that that was horrible clip art. And they were also saying that about the DLR Band album too, which cracks me up calling it clip art. It might have been Dave and Dave Unchained coming soon, and I spoiled
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
They were just
Yeah.
ranting about it looked like bad Microsoft clip art.
Yeah, the
I
devil on the
think
cover.
there's so many weird things where the music video for A Little Ain't Enough looks like it's clearly very expensive. Supposedly 6 or 7 day shoot, and they all these locations, and so that's really expensive. And the stage show was really high tech and expensive, but the album cover looks like just budget clip art. But in general, there's not a lot of EPK footage from that era. It's kind of the beginning of when there's minimal footage of Dave. And you have to wonder if that's by design because, let's face it, he was old by MTV standards at that point in time, or if he was self conscious, or it was just, which is my theory, he no longer had his Pete Angelus co pilot telling him, Dave, that's a terrible idea. Dave, do it this way instead. He no longer had that equal guitar player, that equal co-manager, that producer that was like a Ted Templeman calling the shots. And I think if you want Dave at his best, it's when he has a co-pilot creatively, business-wise, as opposed to him just barking orders at everyone.
Yeah, Pete Angelus was with the Black Crowes by that time, managing the Black Crowes in 91.
Yeah, so one of the things I did for this book was digging up corporate records to find out when Van Halen actually disbanded, when Diamond Dave Productions disbanded, when he parted ways with Pete Angelus. It looks like it was 89 or 90 that him and Pete Angelus parted ways. It might have been a technicality waiting on some documents to be filed, but once Pete left, Dave was never the same caliber, never the same image, nothing.
Yeah, and that album went gold. Eat 'em and Smile platinum, Skyscraper platinum. Plus, he's got a top 10 single with Just Like Paradise. A Little Ain't Enough, Gold, Sensible Shoes, A Little Ain't Enough gets a lot of rotation on MTV, but they're not the hits that were like Just Like Paradise and Yankee Rose, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Your Filthy Little Mouth, this is now, by this time, grunge is taken over. So I wonder, I think about this, would Dave have been better off not making any album at all, just going away, waiting for that whole grunge phase to pass, come back, or do an album like Your Filthy Little Mouth, where to me it seems like creatively he probably had a lot of fun because he was doing jazz, he was doing country, he was doing R&B, reggae. I mean, he was doing it all. What do you make of Your Filthy Little Mouth? Because we know it didn't do well at all. She's My Machine was the single, followed up with Nightlife, the cover of Willie Nelson's Nightlife. But the album, let's face it bombed. You know, Terry Kilgore was on guitar. What do you make of it? I still can listen to a lot of that album. I do enjoy the songs, but we get it. We can't change anybody's opinions on this album.
I think that with Dave, 91 is the turning point, because when you really think about it, what we know about Dave from between, say, 91 and 02 is a lot of guessing, a lot of going, well, there's sort of this and there's sort of that, so I guess we can conclude this. Because how many photos of Dave do you see from 1992? Because the A Little Ain't Enough tour, it's not like it went from 18 months or anything like that. It did the European leg, went to the US, canceled some of the shows, the end.
Did you see that tour?
No, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did. He came to Connecticut.
Was that Cinderella and
Extreme?
Yeah.
And Pornography had just come out. Yeah.
Dave and Sharon might have had their interactions on that tour. Yeah, I wish I'd seen it. I've watched a few shows on YouTube. There's a good one from Sweden. I know at the end, spoiler alert, the legs open up around the drum riser. It's a cool looking tour. The band was very good. I don't like the set list. I think the set list is way too much A Little Ain't Enough, if I may say so. That'll probably draw heat from all the Dave purists. But I could hear Dave do the same hits over and over and over again because he brings out such great energy to it. Now, Sensible Shoes was kind of a hit, but I can't listen to Sensible Shoes that much. And live, it's kind of boring.
Well, I don't even know. Did he play it live? Because the show I went to, he did not. But I will never forget it. As soon as the lights went down, they played Sensible Shoes over the loudspeakers.
I believe you are correct about that. And it's always funny when some bands don't play songs live, but it's their Curtains Up song, like Kiss with God Gave Rock and Roll to You. That was always the Lights Up song.
Yeah.
And made you wonder, oh, is it that Paul couldn't sing those notes and that's why that happened?
Yeah, I remember that. But that was the first time I remember being bummed because I'm such a Dave fan that I flew the Dave flag for so long and still do. I love Dave. He's just the greatest front man I've ever seen or heard.
Totally.
And I remember walking out of that show and I'm hearing people say, I don't know. I didn't like that. I don't think Dave was good. And I remember being like, what? Because I just always had this idea that Dave could do no wrong. And that was when it started to, and then you started getting like, if you're a Kiss fan around 1980, you get teased by your friends. Now like Dave's,
Shandy?
yeah, Shandy. But now it's like Dave's now a punchline, because Van Halen was kicking ass with Sammy and all of a sudden Dave's playing. I remember seeing him play here in Connecticut for like 2,000, 3,000 people for the Your Filthy Little Mouth tour. And I was like, this just can't be. This can't be. This guy is like the greatest front man ever. And he's got all these connections and he can bring in them the best guitarists in the world. What's going on?
I think the reason that the attendance dropped so much was that his publicist was Mitch Schneider. No, I'm kidding.
But what do you make? I mean, a lot of that is
the best.
A lot of that was out of his control. Let's face it. The music industry was changing. There were only, I don't even think, a handful of bands from the 70s and 80s who survived the grunge era. Van Halen with Sammy was one. Aerosmith, we know, was
Hmm.
AC/DC, I think you could put them in there.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know anybody else. Am I missing?
I mean, Foreigner did not survive that era, nor did Def Leppard. But the way that they've revised history, it's like, yes, and we're
Yeah.
firing on all cylinders. Yes, Motley Crue was
Well,
alive and well. And you go,
right.
don't think Hooligan's Holiday and Primal Scream were these massive hits.
By the way, you listen to Hooligan's Holiday. If they had just called themselves, I was thinking this because I listened to the album just over the weekend. If this hindsight is 2020, call the band Hooligan's Holiday, promote the tour saying with members of Motley Crue. But if you listen to that album as a standalone album, as a rock and roll fan, that album kicks ass. But it's not Motley Crue. It doesn't
Agreed.
sound at all. Like the only recognizable sound in there is Tommy Lee's drums. Like you could make out if you're a Tommy fan, you could he's got a style. But even Mick Mars's guitar
I'm
riffs,
with you.
we're kind of
But you make a really good point.
straying
Like,
afar from the Dave topic here. But just saying,
you raise a good point about how many of those bands survived. Bon Jovi,
Bon Jovi did, but they with ballads only. Do
but
you
Bon
remember that?
Jovi
They were only getting hits out of ballads.
agreed. But Bon Jovi did what some of the bands from that era did, which was they went to Europe and overseas to reinvent themselves and make up for it. So Bon Jovi is more of a European thing than an American thing, contrary to what people from New Jersey will tell you. Bon Jovi is an international global sensation. Scorpions as well. Scorpions were going to Indonesia and Greece. I think the Scorpions MTV Unplugged was taped in Greece.
Mm.
A lot of these bands looked for the tertiary markets, built up the fan bases over there. Def Leppard is another one of them. You could find these videos of Def Leppard from the late 90s going to Korea, which was barely a rock market at that point, and now it's totally a fine place to tour if you're a huge rock band. So they were developing all these places that it didn't work out on, and it would have been so smart of Dave to do that, because instead this 94 tour on Your Filthy Little Mouth, he's playing bars, he's playing clubs, he's barely theaters. He played a beach club in my town. He played basically the equivalent in Jersey on that tour. I think he played Town Hall in New York City, which, depending on who you ask, that place holds 800 or 2,000.
Wow.
But that's all a far cry from Madison Square Garden, which is 10 blocks away.
10 years before he was playing.
Yeah.
To his credit, though, Dave put it all out there. Again, the ultimate professional. I remember him putting it all out there. At the end of the show, he did like 10 kicks in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was like, It wasn't like he was just like, shit, what's this sucks. I'm just going to take your money and go home. I mean, he was still putting everything, the martial arts mentality. Like, you get on that floor and you wash that floor like a washerwoman.
I hate that story. I hate that. Opens up, I think, his Crazy from the Heat book about how he washes the floor to show it respect. And you go, okay, so you probably were in the bus for 4 to 8 hours from the last night. So explain where in the day, if there's that, and then there's like sleeping and you're doing press and you're on stage and you're warming up and you're waiting for the show. Tell me what hours there are that you were scrubbing the stage. There's so many things that Dave talks about. Yes, sometimes we blank. My wife and I have argued about this. When he says that he roller skates and all the places that he roller skates, you go, really? You did it once or twice. That's it.
Again, you've given Dave the chance. Dave, if you're watching this or listening to this, I'll give you Darren's email.
I don't see how many hours in the day. If you have 24 hours a day, and you're going to be sleeping X number of hours and working X number of hours, and then calling people and going to the bathroom and showering and all that, then you go, you know what I'm going to do for the next 3 hours? I'm going to get on my hands and knees and scrub the stage.
You picture like one of the maintenance men at the venue, like, who's that up there on this? Is that fucking David Lee Roth? Is he washing the floor? What's he doing?
Yeah,
I scrubbing away with a bucket.
I just don't buy that. For
how are you? I'm just washing the stage here.
I think if there were a camera crew coming, he would do that.
Right.
because he's good at staging stuff. I'm not saying he doesn't do good deeds and he doesn't do manual labor. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying there's only so many hours in the day. And when you're going to talk about taking Portuguese lessons and getting your full body tattooed and that you record all these unreleased songs because it's what you do and you paint and you're traveling and sometimes you're in LA and sometimes you're in New York and sometimes Japan and sometimes you're not washing the stage.
Yeah, you question the washing the stage. Darren Paltrowitz, the author of the brand new book, DLR Book, How David Lee Roth Changed the World. VanHalenStore.com is where you get the book. Yeah, 1995, the most surreal year in the history of being a Dave fan. He goes on that Vegas tour and he stops by the Tonight Show with Jay Leno for a bizarre appearance. Even Eddie felt like bad, when he said he saw Dave comes out, he's wearing all white. That was wow. And I remember Robin Williams was off the wall, even he was like kind of like, oh baby. You could see like he could read his lip. He's like, well, as they're going to a commercial and Dave turns to, he's like, hey Robin, how are you? And
I mean, in terms of that clip, have you watched that recently? The Dave on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno?
I think the last time I saw it was probably a few years back, maybe.
Did you ever see the EPK or some of the video footage that was up, or just the Leno?
Saw the Leno. I don't think I've ever seen. Maybe I have seen brief clips here and there. Is it on YouTube?
It got pulled. I can't remember who had posted it, but it's almost like a 10-minute sampler from rehearsals. And,
okay.
And
well, like Henry Rollins said, he whipped his band into shape. He had Edgar Winter. I mean, it wasn't like, I'm glad if Dave had fun doing it, man. Hey, I'm all for any artist doing what they want to do. That's cool. It's just, I could not. That was one I couldn't do. How do
I put it? Sometimes you go, well, some of blank is better than not at all. I think with adult eyes right now, I would love that show that he did in 95. Absolutely love it because it's like the most palatable Broadway kind of show there is. I'm not a Broadway person unless it's Book of Mormon or Avenue Q or something that's really funny and making fun of Broadway. So as a 40-something, that Dave show from 95, I would love it. But in 95, I probably would have been livid and hating it and going, where's the guitar? Because I don't think he had a guitar in that band. Yeah, so it was kind of Dave being way ahead of the curve.
Right. That was before Vegas was the thing for rockers.
But also at the same time, he was I know he was at Bally's, canceled him. I can't remember if MGM Grand offhand was the other one. MGM Grand was state of the art and kind of new in 95, but Bally's was old. So in other words, he didn't go to the most forward thinking casinos in Vegas. He was going to old person Vegas.
Right.
And I think in Vegas, the casino that you choose to align with says about a lot about the show. So for example, when Resorts World opened in the past couple of years, overseas Resorts World is more of like an Asia-based thing. The one in New York is not so great, but the Vegas Resorts World is Michelin-starred chefs in a food court, very cool. So I think it opened with Katy Perry. So you go, oh, okay, so 30-somethings who have money, who are there for a weekend getaway, cool. But then when you think Bally's, you think of people wearing fanny packs and,
right.
rolls of quarters and shorts that are neon. It's just not right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, but as we know, things do get better as we get into the next decade. But before all that is the near Van Halen reunions, 1996, the Van Halen MTV 15-minute reunion.
Depending on who you asked, it was supposed to be forever, and other people say it was just supposed to be 2 songs. And I still don't think we know the full story.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, what did Dave have to say about how that all came about? And then how does that narrative greatly vary from what Eddie Van Halen told reporters?
Eddie was saying it's just 2 songs, and let's see. And Dave thought, well, the magic is back, so we're back. And then Dave was on Howard Stern a day or two after that, giving him the exclusive and talking like he's already back in Van Halen. Everyone just refers to that one press conference thing, but there was also an interview that they did with Kurt Loder as a band. There was like 3 or 4 different interviews that and appearances that happened as part of that. And Eddie was talking about having hip surgery. So if Eddie was about to have hip surgery, they weren't going to go on a world tour right away. Nowadays, people seem to almost have like outpatient with hip surgery and knee replacement, but that was not the case in the mid 90s. You were kind of down for the count for a little while. You were not going to be doing photo shoots and walking around and jumping off your amp and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, but Dave thought that this was going to be something that was going to stick and they were going to go out there and tour and maybe make a full album. But Eddie all along said, no, it's not the deal. In fact, they had Mitch Malloy ready to go. And then Mitch Malloy saw the MTV Awards and says,
Yeah.
No, I don't think I want this. And Eddie got pissed because he said, you should really get Dave back. Then comes Gary Cherone.
And possibly with a Canadian singer in the midst of that as well.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, the female.
Yes.
Jordan.
Sass Jordan, yeah.
Sass Jordan. Right.
Sass Jordan, which was kind of Taylor Hawkins' first gig of note before Alanis. She, in the chronology, was around in that same era, but it's really not clear who was offered it versus Eddie going, you're the person, and them going, oh, okay. Because since Eddie's died, how many people have come out saying, yeah, I was asked to be the lead singer of Van Halen? We get from the Van Hagar era, we hear that Patti Smythe was offered the gig
Daryl Hall.
Eddie sat in on a Scandal gig for a weekend.
Right. Yeah, but Daryl Hall said.
Yeah.
Then
there's
Ozzy Osbourne in the middle of the night.
Pete Townsend.
Yeah.
Then Glenn Hughes recently did that interview saying he was going to get it, but then Eddie was worried about his sobriety. Then we find out that Sebastian Bach says that he was going to be offered it, but Van Halen didn't want a lead singer who smoked pot. Those are his words. I'm not.
Those are his words. He said it on stage. Yeah, the other night. He said that story more than a few times. What's the story MTV VJ Kennedy told you backstage at the MTV Video Awards that night?
I interviewed her when she was promoting a thing on Fox News where I think she's still full-time as an anchor, and she could not have been nicer. And I think she was shocked that I threw in a Van Halen question. But she said that she's wearing a really fancy ball gown, and Dave said something along the lines of like, that's a beautiful dress. It'll look even more beautiful on my floor. That kind of a thing. And Eddie got steamed at him and chided him. And she was going, oh, no, I love bad jokes. I love bad pickup lines. But possibly did Kennedy break up Van Halen? That's one of my questions/theories.
That may be. What's the biggest surprise you got out of the book after doing all of the research and the interviews? Anything in the book that you didn't know before writing it?
I didn't know the full story about the morning radio show from K-Rock that was syndicated out through Infinity and K-Rock and all that. And some of that started with Gary Marino, who we've had on the DLR cast, who's a comic in the Boston area who produces shows. Gary's a great guy. So he told me some stuff about that. And then I was able to talk at length with Hutch, or John Hutchinson, who kind of gave me an exclusive for the book. He said, don't use it on the DLR cast. Don't put it as an article, just for the book. And I was so worried about misquoting him. When I finally sent him the book, he went, great, you said it all. And getting Hutch's seal of approval was important. And then another person that was really important in the book was Doug Short, who we lost a couple of months ago. He was Dave's front of house sound and tour manager in the early 2000s, worked with a lot of bands. So these were guys that when something happened in a particular era, I'd go, okay, who's my Dave Whisperer 2003? Doug, did this ever happen? And I kind of could do that. So I learned who my Dave Whisperers were, and that's a lot of what the book is.
Yeah, so that's from 2004, the radio gig.
I'm correct you, 2006.
2006, you're right.
It started January 2006 and is off the air in March 2006. but there was a secret-ish, unless you lived in Boston, there was a secret demo, on-air demo for about a
Right.
week around
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Day
He was
05.
trying out for the gig,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
I didn't go into this in the book, but it makes you wonder if they gave Dave the radio show based on how good Dee Snider was in radio. If they went, okay, blonde 80s guy who's a good talker, Dee has done really good in radio. If they went, well, he could do it. Dave.
Did you like his radio show?
I do. I mean, kind of like you, I'm a Stern guy until a certain era. And Dave's show had 0% in common with Stern, which is weird because Dave was such a close friend of Stern. So I like his show, but it's so many words. Like, you think I talk a lot? Dave talks 4 times more non sequitur.
You talked with people there that said the behind the scenes stuff that went on at that radio gig, the meetings. I don't even know how Dave put up with that, because
I
I've
think it
worked
was
in
a
radio and I
cheap.
know there's, it's non-creative people, and Dave is like the most creative person you could possibly imagine, telling him what to do.
Yeah, he's not a person who likes to rehearse. He likes to practice life skills, but he doesn't like to rehearse. And unless you're Howard Stern or Opie and Anthony, who are also of that time, I think radio has a lot of rehearsal and prep to it. Whereas Dave kind of wants to get the sheet and go like, okay, what can we talk about? And do it that way. But there's a person who asked that I had this happen a few times for this book where somebody goes, oh, you're writing a book? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's just get on the phone. And then they tell you the whole life story and you go, so I can use that? And they go, no. Okay, so we're going to do an interview? No. And you go, then why did you just tell me all this stuff? So there's one person who is a journalist in the Georgia area who may or may not have written some Van Halen press releases. I think his reason was, well, I might write a book about Dave one day. You go, oh, okay. Thank you for telling me your whole life story.
Right.
But he told me about behind the scenes stuff on that show. It sounded like Dave had some kind of a button that he could hit to make it go dead air when he didn't like what was going on. So in other words, you didn't necessarily hear the whole show.
Wow. Yeah, I think he got into some heated discussions too with
Yeah.
some of those guys. I can just imagine, like, who the fuck you think you're talking about? Don't tell me. I mean, I could just see it. Well,
The
Dave,
same people
Dave,
Howard
we
Stern.
love you, Dave, but we just gotta, if you could just do, like, get the fuck out of my face.
It's exactly what Howard Stern had to deal with. And Howard Stern was able to turn that into entertaining segments when he's feuding with Tom Chiusano and all the programming directors and all that. I think Howard knew what he could get away with and how to play it up and make it great radio. If you're not an experienced radio person, it's just aggravation that gets in
Yeah.
the
Well,
way.
and Howard told David, I think you really need to, I think before he had Dave on, as they transitioned and Howard was leaving and Dave's coming in, he's like, I think you really need to talk a lot about your personal life. I don't know if that's something you want to do. And I think that
Yeah.
but Dave's very, very secretive when it comes to his personal life.
He does leave some breadcrumbs out there. He does pop up in stuff, but I think there's a certain generation of mysterious frontmen. Like, for example, Perry Farrell, we know who his wife is. We know about the random him sneaking into fleece free slaves in the middle of the night in some random country and risking his life. We know that stuff, but that's just because he wants us to know who his wife is. And he wants us to know that he freed slaves in the middle of the night and risked his life. Because you go, okay, so are there any photos of Perry Farrell at Nobu? No. Are there photos of him at the China Club? Not that I've seen. But I think when Dave wants to be seen, he's seen. Otherwise, it's baseball cap Dave.
Yeah. I remember whenever you would read an article about him, like he appeared at some event, you're like, oh, new album's coming. You just
It,
knew. He's so smart with that stuff.
I think that Dave does the album slash tour cycle for the 3 years, and then he kind of disappears for 2 to 3 years, and he's probably spending the money that he made in those prior years, acquiring new life skills and new material for him to come back for 2 to 3 years.
98's DLR band album was so good. Black Sand is one of my all-time favorite Dave tracks. And
Yeah.
that's with Terry Kilgore on that one, but John 5 was on that album too. But what is the No Holds Barbecue video? What the hell? This is a head scratcher. Yeah. Well, how did this project come about? And you did talk to some of the people that were involved with it. Like
There's
Mark Elmer,
Mark Elmer.
Dave's Intensity. He said people mistook it for, like, oh shit, Dave's pissed, but he was just, focused.
I did my best to cover that era, that video. And by that, I mean, I spoke to Mark Elmer, who I think spent 6 weeks in the editing bay with Dave on that project, which isn't the whole project. It was edited further than 6 weeks. Movies don't take 6 weeks to get done. So you go 6 weeks doing what? But anyway, I think that they were just trying to find the story in the control room, because they just filmed and went, okay, what can we do with this stuff? And that's kind of that. They were editing around the soundtrack. So anyway, I spoke to him. I spoke to Melissa Elena Reiner, who played violin and some of the live performances as part of that. Dave, if she was going to do the parentheses next to her name, I think Dave would not be in the first 20 names in there. She is a very successful session person, arranger, etc. And she's living in England these days. And she remembered it fondly, but she doesn't know what it's about. And Mitch Schneider, who was Dave's publicist from 91 to 03 or 04, I think it's 03, that he kept on with Dave, came back a little while, a couple of years later. And I spoke to Ray Luzier, but not about that project. There might have been one or two more people, but I mentioned all that. And then after I finished the damn book, I befriended somebody who was actually there for every single day of it.
Oh, after the book was done?
After the book was done, one of the people I sent an Instagram message to, because I was going through credits in the DLR band album when I was writing the book and going, maybe they know something. And there's one guy who didn't get back to me until like 3 months ago. And I went, oh, the book's done, but do you want to talk? And we got on the phone a few times, and every now and then text. And anytime I go, so in between 2002 and 2012, did this happen? And he goes, oh, it happened. So he was there, and he has no idea what it was. No one knows what that thing was.
But they all just followed Dave's orders. Like, he's the man. We do what he says.
I've heard that it was him trying to, like, the Osbournes was a thing at the time. So it was him trying to do the next wave of reality television. And I've heard that, oh no, it was him trying to do some kind of a TV pilot, the new MTV. I've heard it's oh no, this is just him. Instead of an album, he's done a video album. I've heard oh no, he just wants to make art for the sake of art. But he put $1 million or so into that. And he just basically took his publishing money and then put it into that.
Yeah, to me, it seemed like art for the sake of art. That, to me, is what it came off as.
That's a real recurring theme in this book, art for the sake of art. There's a lot of projects where you go, what was he thinking? Well, he felt like doing it, like that Tokyo Story short film or the paintings, or.
But I think that's cool. I just think that's cool when creative people do creative things without no real goal in mind other than just to do it. Whether people like it or not, it's still something, he's just following his muse, Yeah.
But the soundtrack itself is great. And that should have been a proper album. And
the
instead,
ELO song Shine a Light, he does a cover of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The weird Asian Dub Foundation sort of song, the weird Chemical Brothers song. Okay. So, some of it's better than others. Tomorrow Never Knows, which did come out. Right. Okay. But I like a lot of the music on there, and it's never been commercially released. Just the YouTube version, which is not the version that was sold and distributed to press.
Yeah. He did Baker Street.
Yeah.
Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street.
And
Yeah.
Mustang Sally, he did. And
Yep.
um, what's he did Hendrix If Six Was Nine, I think.
Which he did end up putting on the Diamond Dave album.
Yeah, there's some really interesting things on there in general. There's a weird jazz improv or two that are instrumental. But we also get the like, I'm Diamond Dave and this is the Mojo Dojo. And then he starts playing a steel drum. There's also that too.
Yeah. No, shortly before that, because that came out in like was it 03? Was it before or after the Sam and Dave tour he did that?
I think
Or
it was
same time.
because if you watch that Hartford video, it has cut some footage into
Right.
that.
I
It
was
was
at that
01
show.
or 02.
Okay. Okay. So now
Bart
short,
Walsh,
but Bart
yeah.
Walsh.
Bart Walsh is in it, but Bart Walsh was not on the Sam and Dave tour.
Right. Brian Young was.
Yeah.
Now, just before that, though, we had Frank Meyer. Again, here we go. He blew the minds of Van Halen fans. He was on your podcast, and he was saying that Dave was at 5150 Studios in 2000 to record songs. But again, another failed attempt.
Yeah.
And Frank said a lot of those songs, or some of those songs, ended up on Different Kind of Truth.
And credit goes to your buddy Jeff Hausman of Van Halen News Desk, because he said that I was full of crap until he heard me describe what Frank said about those songs, which is that they cut off after 90 seconds or midway, because a lot of people had written into Van Halen News Desk over the years going, I heard those demos and they're great. And I think Jeff's test at the time was, oh yeah, you heard them?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Something unique about that.
Exactly. Jeff. Yeah. He's ever the solid journalist, Jeff. Yeah. He put you to the test, but yeah,
And,
ultimately
yeah.
you found it because there was something specific about those tracks. It wasn't the full track.
They cut off midway because
and the reason,
supposedly because Dave did not want to get steamrolled by the Van Halens or have them use it without his consent or monetize it, because there wasn't that trust. That I'm wondering if Van Halen is kind of like the Beach Boys, where when they're all in the room, they can get along. But the second that the wives, girlfriends, and managers come in, that complicates everything. I get the vibe that Kiss is that same way. They all get along just fine, but the managers, wives, and girlfriends come in, and then it's chaos. Because Dave seems like he and Alex didn't have a problem the last 20 years.
what songs were on that, by the way, that he recorded that ends up on Different Kind of Truth?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it might have been like Honey Baby Sweetie Doll.
That sounds right. I know it's 4 songs that made a different kind of truth.
4? Okay. I found the article that we put on VHND, and it's got Frank's quotes. As is, Honey Baby Sweetie Doll,
Yeah.
Trouble with Never,
Yeah.
Blood and Fire.
See, I remember 99% of what I wrote in the book, but for some reason, that's the 1% I couldn't remember which songs it was that they cut in the first place in the early 2000s. So that has kind of fallen out of my brain.
Yeah. Well, let's talk the Sam and Dave tour, summer 2002. And looking back on this, it's like, I can't even believe it happened. Doug Short told you a story. There's so much to pick from this, but I just figured let's go to a quote from Doug Short, who is talking about the poor souls who didn't last more than a week as the sound guy, right? They were working the sound, and Dave would get pissed pretty quickly.
Yeah, Dave's known to be hard on drummers, and that's not throwing him under the bus. I guess he just has high expectations for the drummer and thinking that the drummer leads the band and sets the tone of the energy. And also when you play with Alex, who has that trademark snare drum sound to his playing, you want the best.
Set the bar high.
Yeah, but at the same time, your sound guy is how you can hear yourself on stage. Your sound guy is whether or not the crowd hears a good mix. So maybe you do have to be hard on the sound people as well. And it seems like it was a revolving door at that point. And Doug, who came in, jokingly, they started calling him number 5 because he was the 5th one to be on that tour. They said, you're going to be fired so quickly, we don't even want to learn your name. So supposedly the laminate he had said number 5 on it, and people just called him number 5, but turns out he stuck around for years.
Dave's time as an EMT, he took that seriously, right? That was the woman that you spoke with, who was his instructor, kind of was a little weary. Like, what's he up to? Is this like a publicity stunt or something? But it wasn't.
And she also was trusted enough by Dave that she was briefly his personal assistant, or one of them, and worked with him on the radio show. She was one of the people who helped prep him by reading the magazines and the newspapers and going, here's some stuff to talk about on air. So that, I don't think most people who teach EMTs make it into entertainment like she did. So Linda, I think she also has a leather goods company these days, happily retired, but you could hire her to instruct. So if anybody watching or listening goes, I want to learn how to be an EMT, she's going to have to trust you, but she's apparently the best teacher there is. She was handpicked when they knew that Dave wanted an instructor.
That's cool. And then he does return to Van Halen in 2007. And if it's not for Wolfgang telling his dad, his pops, let's get Dave back. And he was back. Tour was a huge success. And then the album, Different Kind of Truth. You spoke with Ross Hogarth, who was the engineer for A Different Kind of Truth. He said working with Dave was a challenge.
He did say that because it sounded like Ross came into it as a Van Halen person, because we now know that A Different Kind of Truth was kind of recorded separately between the Van Halen and Roth camps. And the more people I speak with, the more people I'm trying to say how to, without giving up sources and screwing people's NDAs up.
Which there are quite a few. You said a lot of non-disclosure agreements. Can't say anything.
Is it the Sunshine Act where you don't have to reveal your sources, or you do have to? Okay, whatever it is.
We'll look it up.
Dave, his way of writing and singing with people and collaborating, it's not like I'm going to hum along to your guitar part. It's more like he goes, record this. Okay, I'll take it home. See you later. And he does it privately, one-on-one. And that's not common for co-writes. That's not common for major artists. I'm very surprised that he just go, okay, I can do it all myself here. But that's what A Different Kind of Truth sounded like it was, that, okay, give me the music. Now I'll put on my vocals. But we now know that he added in keyboard to tattoo. I think the holdup on this John 5 album might have been him adding stuff. Like, as in, the album was never done. People I've spoken with who went, yeah, there isn't an album. There's a bunch of rough mixes.
And this is the one with Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill and, I don't know, 6 or 7 others.
Which a person who knows what they're talking about told me was recorded at the same time, just about the same time as A Different Kind of Truth.
Isn't that wild? So your thought process on that is that Dave was not sure which way things were going to go in terms of Van Halen, so he was ready? Or those were songs he wanted Van Halen to use on Different Kind of Truth?
He has said both. He said I think it's a USA Today interview from 2010 or 2011, where he talks about how he presented these songs that he wrote with John 5 for Van Halen. And then I think in another article, he talked about how it was for a jukebox musical because he'd just seen Book of Mormon. And you go, Book of Mormon was not a jukebox musical under any definition or circumstance. So I heard all that, but then a person who really knows what they're talking about, I don't think they're under an NDA, told me that it was I don't trust these guys. I'm going to do this album just in case they screw me.
So kind of similar to the half recordings from 2000.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Dave didn't travel with the Van Halens. Have you ever seen those floating around internet things on the Van Halen Facebook groups that it's the set list, and at the bottom it says Van Halen's doing a runner, Dave is sticking around.
Yeah, well, and also people that were backstage would say like Dave was never around, didn't see him. Like he just, when Showtime hit, okay, there he is, he hits the stage. But Ed Allen Wolf would be hanging out. You may run into him here and there, and he would chat it up with you. But Dave, nowhere to be found.
But before you think that means that I'm implying he doesn't care and he didn't do anything, somebody was telling me a story about these, because Dave, when he goes on tour, multiple people have told me about this from different eras of Dave. he designs a lot of stage clothing for his tours, a lot. And he, I think for Van Halen, for one of the reunion tours, designed basically like Sergeant Pepper's suits for them to wear. I think he was like making them wear it, and eventually I think Eddie went, cut it out now. But he's very specific about the stage design, the wardrobe, all the visuals. That's Dave. I don't know how specific he is about the set list. I think they said that Wolfie chose the set list for at least the 2007 tour, but Dave cares about how everything looks.
And it's understandable. He might have been because he's the, who knows? He's backstage. He's doing what he's got to do to get ready for the show. Yeah, I don't think it's good or bad, but the point being too that he wasn't really. It wasn't like he was hanging with the guys before and after the show.
No,
you know, maybe between gigs, him and Al were hanging, but
I forget who it was who was on the DLR cast. It might have been the member of the band Red Rain, Reign, and he said something like he's backstage at some show that he snuck into in the early 2000s, and he almost stepped on Dave. He didn't notice that he was like laying down on the floor or something like that backstage at some amphitheater because he was out surfing all day and he was like taking a rest.
mm.
And
boy,
yeah, I just get the vibe that he goes, okay, we're on at 9. Okay, I'll show up for hair and makeup at 8:15. The rest of this day, I'm going to be roller skating and surfing and painting and editing video on my bus and raising my dog and learning Portuguese and playing
Russ.
guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Russ, that was
I
his
don't
buddy.
think that he's at sound check. I don't think that he's hanging out. You know, people I spoke with who were around the Kiss tour in 2020, they did not see him before the show. It's more like the music director's job to kind of rehearse the band and prep them. And then when Dave's coming, everyone get ready.
If there's anything that we missed, I think we covered a lot. And there's much more in the book.
I mean, without giving stuff away, we talk about the hidden or secret Vegas residency that happened between the first and the last one. We talk about Tokyo Dave, which I was able to get some exclusives on. And I don't think they appeared on the podcast because they were a little cagey about putting that information out to anything besides the book. Still waiting to hear back from them about where I can mail their copies to. But Tokyo Dave is one of my big obsessions.
Yeah, what was it? Didn't Eddie say that Dave was butchering the Japanese?
Eddie said that, but I asked other people, went, no, his Japanese is fine. Okay, this is why I'm thinking that Dave speaks great Japanese, because singers are usually great with languages because language is an auditory thing. It's a rhythmic, tone-based mimic kind of thing. And Dave is great with voices. So I would think that Dave, that is why he can speak Spanish and Portuguese and Japanese and probably a little bit of a bunch of other languages.
Listen, I don't know any Japanese, but this applies to anything Dave says. Sometimes I'm not sure what the hell he's talking about, but I love the way he says it. And then even he's the one who tells you may not know what I'm saying, but you'll love the way I say it. I just love the way he talks with such conviction and confidence behind everything he does.
Sure.
That's why he's a great salesman. Like, you just believe I'm buying what he's selling, basically. I mean, he's just he's one of a kind. But yeah, let's get up to date now. So since Eddie passed in October of 2020, Dave he's been laying low as far as like public sightings, but he's been very busy. Get us up to speed on like what Dave's been up to since that 2015 tour, and
Yeah.
what do you think he's going to do next?
For a guy who retired, he's been doing a lot of stuff. Because if you remember that 2021 residency was supposed to be, or I'm sorry, 2022 residency rather. That post COVID, you kind of group those years together, or at least I do.
Well, you were going to go to one of those shows, weren't you?
The wife and I were there. We were there, and we were.
Oh, what am I saying? Yeah, you were keeping me up to speed via texts. I remember that.
Yeah, we were going to. So is the show happening tonight or not? They weren't giving you clear answers.
I remember that.
When the House of Blues venue inside of Mandalay Bay, was showing all the upcoming shows, and it didn't say canceled. They kept showing it. And we had to find out through a person, through a person, through a person. And then all these people are checking Twitter and going, well, the Twitter says that, but the Instagram says that. But you didn't know. And I think it only leaked through Live Nation's national, but not the Live Nation Vegas, or it was like House of Blues had it, but not House of Blues Vegas. No one was on the same page of knowing if it was canceled or not. And it was really just canceled hours before the first show. Then the second show, again, hours before, we were at this famous Italian restaurant called the Bootlegger that's off Strip. I think Bruce Kulick just had his 70th birthday party there, but
Cool.
I just said that just to show off that I knew that. But
80s Kiss, man. Bruce was.
I love Bruce Kulick, but we didn't know it was canceled. So we, like many people, flew out there, and you have your travel, you have your flight, you have your hotel, you planned your vacation days, and you get there and you go, oh, so are we staying around Vegas or are we going home? What are we doing? So ultimately we stuck it out, but changed our flight early because I got COVID and I couldn't do very much. But not the point. The point is Dave retired from that, and then within like 5 months was doing a private gig in Cabo or something like that, which we're not supposed to know about.
Of all places, in Cabo.
Yeah, it was somebody's extravagant birthday party that everyone had to sign an NDA to go to.
Not Sammy Hagar's. Just
I mean, how great of an irony is that that he played in Sammyville? It was
Sam throws a party. I
Yeah.
am the party.
Sam throws a parade. I'm the rain that, well, whatever. So
But yeah, he's been painting.
he's done a few Vegas
Releasing-
corporate gigs.
Yeah.
Ironically,
Releasing songs here and there from those 2012 sessions or whatever that was.
yeah, the batch of Van Halen re-records, which were definitely not live in the studio.
Oh yeah. He's taking a lot of hits for those. Why do you think he's doing that?
I think
Publishing?
because he's one of the Joe Rogan interviews while Eddie was still alive. He said, I am Van Halen. Just like Sammy, this whole summer tour is I am Van Halen. They're both on the same quest to carry on the legacy and demonstrate finally who's the greatest of all time.
Mm.
And the answer is neither of them is the greatest of all time. But he did those 20 or so songs in the studio. A source told me there's still more unreleased stuff from that session, which I think was May 2022 when he had the band in Henson. The John 5 sessions, I think there's a handful of more songs to still go from that. There's still a couple of hundred unreleased covers, demos, doodlings. I don't know that if they'll ever come out. There's still the unreleased Eat 'em and Smile Pro Shot, which Billy Sheehan has.
A Dave solo box set would be nice.
There's still the Skyscraper Japanese special, which is Pro Shot, that never came out. So whether any of that happens, I don't know. I think we'll continue to see a dance video, a painting, and a new recording alternately for the next 3 years.
Unexpectedly.
Yeah, I think he'll do a couple more of these Steve Stevens corporate gigs when the offer is right. But I think he is in retirement mode. I don't think he feels there's any stone left unturned with his career. That's where I'm at. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think so. And I always get this feel. I always get this in my head. I picture him like a football player who's put it all out there on the field, like gets up every morning and just everything's killing, everything's aching him, and just he's put it all out there. And there's not much more he can do. I mean, it's he did so much. Like he put so much on stage for so long, right up until really, if you look into like even the early 2000s, he was still doing the splits off the drum riser right up until I think 02. And then as of 03, I think he stopped, or around there. And so he was doing all of that stuff. And then, when he started to lose a bit on his fastball, he would just mix it up and try to do different things. And he would, even like the 07 tour, like with the big red flag, and he's doing all these things. He's just getting creative. continuing to be entertaining. But I think, yeah, I mean, if this is it, I think, he's earned it.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way. I hope that I'd love to see him come back and do something here and there. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. I mean, everybody rags on him for his voice. And to me, the work that he did with Van Halen and solo right up through the late 80s, right into the early 90s, particularly, of course, the Van Halen years, is untouchable. And that's why no matter what he does, to me, you can't tarnish what he did during those, however many years he was with Van Halen from,
Yeah.
early 70s through 84, particularly those studio albums. Untouchable.
I'm with
And
you.
I don't want anybody else singing on those albums. I don't give a shit what anybody says about his voice and all that. You can say what you want about his voice now. His voice was perfect for that band.
Agreed. And I think that we always could be surprised with more stuff. The way that a couple days ago, to really date this to being around Christmas 2023, the way that Super 8 footage from Niagara Falls 78 just came out that on YouTube, and Donington 84,
Take a look at those, and if you have any doubts about what Dave could do, just look at those videos.
Yeah, I think we still might see more of those. I think if he needed the money, he could figure out licensing stuff and digging up unreleased stuff and syncing and approving more things for film and TV. Supposedly from really smart people who were there, who told me this, he's turned down so many film and TV usages. And I don't think he's at a point where he's desperate. He lost a fortune on that tattoo company. That's been confirmed to me that he did. And that was just a
Ink the original
disaster on a lot of ends. But I don't think he's desperate. I think that no matter what he does, he's going to make $2 to $14 million a year off of just royalties, publishing, etc. Just doing nothing.
Good for him. He's earned it, baby. You've earned it, Dave.
Yeah, that's going to happen. And I think that there is a Warner Brothers renegotiation in the near future, and we'll see a different kind of truth go under that. And maybe the Live in Tokyo 2015 goes under that too. And then we'll see a box set or some kind of a new way to repackage the first 6 albums again on the new technology. And he will spend that immediately on fencing lessons and rowing lessons and jazz harmonica training and Mandarin lessons. And that's just what he does. That's our Dave. And he doesn't care if we like it or not.
DLR book, How David Lee Roth Changed the World. It is out January 1st. Interesting because 1984 was released on January 1st. January 1st, 2024. So let's do the math. 94, 2004, 40 years later.
Happy accident. But by the way, not all the credit goes to me. Kevin Baldus from Lit, the bass player from Lit, took exclusive photos that have never been in a book before that are in this, including Eddie's last show at the Hollywood Bowl that he has in there. WWE Hall of Famer Diamond Dallas Page wrote the foreword to it. So it really took a village. Steve Roth was on board for a lot of those interviews. So DLR Cast made this happen. Van Halen News Desk made this happen, etc. So I couldn't have done it without all the fans.
Cool, man. Yeah, people can get it at vanhalenstore.com. And Darren, where can people find you online? Tell us about the DLR Cast, the Paltrow Cast. You're a branding master. What was the last show you're on? He's like, boy, look at you with your branding. It's Paltrow. And
my whole childhood, I hated my last name because the substitute teachers couldn't say it and nobody could say it. And I guess sometimes you can make your weaknesses your strengths by just rebranding it, really. So it's Paltrow everything. So when me and my wife unbox things, it's the Paltrow box, the website and the show and all that, Paltrow Cast with Darren Paltrowitz. So you go to paltrowcast.com. The TV show is on 150 stations and OTT carriers like Byron Allen's Local Now. this is Byron Allen's world. We're just living in it. Let's face it.
Yeah,
Um,
Byron Allen, man. I've watched him
Byron's
since I
going to
was a kid.
own Van Halen news desk within the next 2 years.
Oh, that I wouldn't mind. Byron, tell me what you need me to do next.
But yeah, I mean, paltrowcast.com has most of my interviews, which are on YouTube and Rumble and Odyssey, and also the podcast audio components on Apple and Spotify. And I'm really easy to find, Darren.Paltrowitz at gmail.com. If you need PI work done, investigation stuff, come at me. If
That's your
it's
full-time
legal,
gig, private investigating?
that is the full-time gig. I'm licensed in a few states. If you need the work done and it's legal, I'll do it.
Hmm.
If it's not legal, I'm not doing it. But yeah, that helped me write this book in tracking people down and figuring out that Dr. Jack Roth was Dave's cousin, and here we are.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I love the angle that you take and how you see this world of David Lee Roth from a private investigator's view. It's you're looking for things that not everybody else is looking for, and you question everything. You don't just say, "Okay, I believe it."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are tons and tons of people who know more about Van Halen and David Lee Roth than me. It's just the question of, did they try and connect all the dots and get all the corporate documents and all that? I wanted to put Dave's helicopter license in the book. My publisher
It's
turned that.
another. Oh, wow. That's another fascinating part of his life, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to put that and his EMT license in the book. And they said, well, who gave you permission? I said, well, the Freedom of Information Act said you could do it. And they said, well, show us. And I said, here. And they went, that's still not permission. And you go, but it's a government document. You just black out the contact information. Therefore, it's allowed because anyone can get that. I wouldn't be allowed to have it if it was, illegal or private. But I'm sorry, you're all spared the David Lee Roth helicopter license documentation from the
Oh,
FAA.
man, that could be in the next book. And DLR Cast, people can find it everywhere. YouTube, it's on all the platforms.
Bottom line, though, and this is not empty praise, without what you and Jeff do, Van Halen would not have the fan base that it continues to have because Van Halen doesn't give us steady social media content. They don't recap when other musicians talk about Van Halen. So, Eric, thanks to you and Jeff and team for this, and thanks for the fans for keeping the mighty Van Halen alive.
Thanks, man. Yes, it's a pleasure. Van Halen is it's forever a part of our lives, and Dave too. So, yeah, man. So, Darren, thanks so much.
Nothing but yeah.